I was the leader of the Broadway show. All right, stop it. Everybody just calm down. Everybody Loves Raymond was a hugely popular show with a beloved cast, but not all actors stayed for the entire run, and not one was happy about these goodbyes. Some left the show for various personal and professional reasons. Others had different motivations, like pursuing new opportunities or dealing with scheduling conflicts. Still, why would a part of something big and popular leave just like that? Let's try to explore the real reasons behind some of the cast's departures from one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, Doris Roberts. When Everybody Loves Raymond came to an end in 2005 after 9 hilarious and heartfelt seasons, fans all over the world felt like they were saying goodbye to a second family. The Barones had become a part of our lives, almost like that loud, dysfunctional, but lovable family you can't help but adore. And at the center of that chaos was Marie Barone, the ultimate overbearing mother, played to absolute perfection by Doris Roberts. With her sharp tongue, meddling ways, and surprising bursts of deep love, Marie was unforgettable. So naturally, after the show ended, a lot of fans expected to see Doris pop up in another TV role soon. But that didn't really happen in a major way, and it left people wondering, why? First off, it's important to understand that Doris Roberts didn't leave the show in the way some actors do. Everybody Loves Raymond didn't fall apart or lose cast members. The show ended on a strong note, with the entire cast still together, still delivering the same brilliant chemistry they had from the beginning. In fact, the creators made a conscious decision to end while the show was still on top. Everyone involved, including Doris, respected that decision, even if it was hard to say goodbye. The cast had become like family in real life, too, and parting ways after almost a decade wasn't easy. For Doris, Marie Barone wasn't just another acting gig. She once said in interviews that Marie was a character she truly understood and connected with. Marie had layers. She could be annoying, sure, but she was also fiercely loving, proud, and even vulnerable at times. Doris brought real heart to the role, and audiences felt that. Over time, she and Marie practically became one and the same in people's minds. That kind of connection to a character can be both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it's a huge accomplishment. On the other, it makes moving on really tough. For Doris, finding another role that felt equally meaningful or satisfying just didn't come easily. Another big reason she didn't jump into more TV work is that Doris was actually pretty selective. After spending 9 years in a demanding high-profile sitcom, she wanted to do things on her own terms. She wasn't interested in playing just another mother-in-law or being reduced to a stereotypical old lady role. She had range, serious acting chops, and she didn't want to be boxed in. So rather than accept roles that didn't excite her or do projects just for the paycheck, she turned her attention elsewhere. And that elsewhere was actually pretty impressive. Doris Roberts had a deep love for the stage, and after Raymond, she returned to her theater roots. Stage acting had been a huge part of her early career, long before she became a household name. She found it creatively rewarding, and it allowed her to stretch herself in ways that sitcom acting sometimes couldn't. She also started writing more, sharing insights and experiences from her long career. In fact, she published a memoir called Are You Hungry, Dear?, where she talked openly about her life, her struggles, her triumphs, and, of course, her time on Everybody Loves Raymond. On top of that, Doris also became more involved in advocacy and charitable work, especially around issues affecting older actors in Hollywood. She spoke out about ageism in the entertainment industry, which she had experienced firsthand. She wanted to see more opportunities for older performers and pushed for more respect for senior actors who still had so much to give. That kind of work, though less glamorous than TV roles, was important to her, and she used her voice and platform to make a difference. Of course, she didn't completely disappear from our screens. She made a few guest appearances on shows like Law and Order, SVU, The Middle, and Hot in Cleveland. But she never took on another major long-term TV role, and that was mostly by choice. For Doris, nothing else quite measured up to Marie Barone, not because she couldn't act in other roles, but because she had already created something so iconic that it was hard to top. In the years after Everybody Loves Raymond, Doris Roberts lived a quieter but deeply fulfilling life. She continued acting in smaller doses, worked on stage, wrote, advocated, and spent time with people she loved. She passed away in 2016, and her death hit fans hard. But she left behind an incredible legacy, not just as Marie Barone, but as a trailblazing actress with decades of great work, a wicked sense of humor, and a heart as big as her talent. The second name didn't leave for a common reason. In fact, it was one of the most emotional goodbyes for everyone in the show. Peter Boyle. Peter Boyle, who played the unforgettable Frank Barone on Everybody Loves Raymond, didn't actually leave the show in the way some actors do. He was there from the very beginning in 1996, all the way through to the final episode in 2005. But because he passed away, not long after the series ended, in 2006, it can feel like he left too soon. And in a way, he did. Just not in the typical quitting the show kind of way. His departure from the world, just a year after the finale aired, left fans feeling like they had lost a part of the Barone family. His sharp wit, deadpan delivery, and hilariously inappropriate remarks, as Frank made him one of the show's standout characters. In the last couple of seasons, fans began to notice something. Peter's character, Frank, sometimes didn't have as many scenes, or seemed to be more in the background than he used to be. This led to a lot of speculation. People wondered if maybe Peter had decided to scale back his role, or if the writers had started giving more time to other characters. The truth is, Peter was quietly dealing with a lot behind the scenes. He had been struggling with health issues for years, even during the earlier seasons. He had suffered a heart attack in the 90s, and at one point he battled cancer. He also had a stroke, not long after the show began. These weren't small issues. These were serious, potentially life-threatening conditions. And yet, Peter never let it show. He was a pro through and through. He kept coming to work, learning his lines, and delivering the kind of performances that made Frank Barone unforgettable. Despite his health battles, Peter never gave up on the show. He didn't ask to be written out. He didn't slow down unless it was absolutely necessary. That kind of dedication says a lot about the kind of person he was. He genuinely loved being part of Everybody Loves Raymond. The cast and crew weren't just co-workers to him. They were like a second family. You can tell just by watching behind-the-scenes interviews and cast reunions. There was something special about that group. Ray Romano, Doris Roberts, Patricia Heaton, Brad Garrett. They were all incredibly close, and Peter was right in the middle of that. It wasn't just another acting gig for him. It was a place where he felt at home. In fact, there are stories from the set about how Peter kept everyone laughing between takes. He had this dry, sarcastic sense of humor that mirrored his character. But he was also incredibly warm and thoughtful. People who worked with him have said that even when he wasn't feeling 100%, he still brought his A-game. He might have needed a little extra time, or a bit more rest between scenes. But once the cameras were rolling, he gave it his all. That kind of passion is rare, especially in someone who had already accomplished so much in his career. Before Raymond, Peter had already made a name for himself with powerful roles in both comedy and drama. He played the monster in Young Frankenstein. He was in Taxi Driver, and he earned Emmy nominations for various roles. He could have taken it easy by the time Everybody Loves Raymond came around, but he didn't. He dove into the role of Frank with everything he had. And it paid off. He became a household name to a whole new generation of viewers. And he did it by playing one of the crankiest, most hilariously blunt TV dads ever. When Everybody Loves Raymond finally ended in 2005, it was by choice. The show went out on a high note. The creators and cast felt it was the right time, and they didn't want to drag it out just for the sake of staying on the air. Peter was part of that decision, and part of the farewell. There were no dramatic exits, no off-screen drama. It was just a well-loved show coming to a graceful end with all of its main characters still intact. Sadly, less than 2 years later, Peter passed away due to multiple myeloma and heart disease. He was 71 years old. His death hit the cast hard. Ray Romano has spoken publicly about how difficult it was to lose Peter so soon after the show ended. The whole cast reunited for his funeral, and they've all said that filming Everybody Loves Raymond was one of the best experiences of their lives, largely because of the people and especially because of Peter. Why did Peter Boyle leave Everybody Loves Raymond? The truth is, he didn't. He stayed until the very last episode. He stuck it out through illness and aging, and never let it slow him down unless absolutely necessary. He left the world not long after the show wrapped, and that's what made it feel like such a sudden loss. But he gave everything he had to that role right up until the end. And because of that, Frank Barone lives on. Fans still quote him, laugh at his lines, and remember his gruff wisdom. Peter Boyle may have left us physically, but on screen, he's still very much with us. Meline Sweden. Meline Sweden, who played Ali Barone on Everybody Loves Raymond, was a familiar face to anyone who watched the show. As the oldest Barone kid, she brought a sweet and sometimes sarcastic charm to the role that made her stand out, even though she was acting alongside comedy legends like Ray Romano, Patricia Heaton, and Doris Roberts. She was just 5 years old when the show started, and by the time it ended 9 years later, she was a teenager. For nearly a decade, she grew up on set, living a life most kids can't imagine. But when the show wrapped in 2005, Meline didn't jump straight into another sitcom or chase big Hollywood roles. Instead, she did something pretty rare for a child actor. She took a step back. The truth is, being on a hit TV show can be a double-edged sword, especially when you start that young. Sure, it opens doors and makes you a household name, but it also puts a ton of pressure on you. Pressure to look a certain way, act a certain way, and keep up a certain image. For Meline, the fame and attention that came with Everybody Loves Raymond became overwhelming. The show was beloved by millions, and people often saw her as just Ali, not as her real self. After the show ended, she realized she needed time to figure out who she was outside of that character and the Hollywood bubble she had grown up in. It wasn't that she hated acting or wanted to leave the business forever. She just needed space to breathe, to grow, and to experience life without the constant eyes of the public on her. Being in the spotlight as a kid can sometimes steal your childhood, and it's clear that Meline wanted to reclaim some of that time for herself. So instead of diving into another big project, she took time away from the mainstream industry. She focused on her personal life, her mental health, and just being a normal young adult, which is something a lot of child stars don't get the chance to do. Eventually, she found her way back into acting, but in a much more low-key, independent way. She started taking on roles in indie films and doing voice work, creative outlets that allowed her to express herself without the massive pressure that comes with being in the spotlight. These projects may not have made headlines, but they gave her the freedom to act on her own terms. And honestly, that says a lot about her character. She wasn't interested in fame for the sake of it. She wanted to do meaningful work, while also living a life that felt healthy and balanced. So why did Meline Sweden leave Everybody Loves Raymond or Hollywood after the show ended? Well, She didn't walk away because something went wrong. She walked away because she wanted more out of life than just fame. She wanted to find her own identity, separate from the character people knew her as. It was a brave move, especially in an industry that often pushes young actors to stay relevant at all costs. Instead, she chose peace of mind over public attention. And while we may not see her on our screens every week anymore, that choice makes her story even more admirable. Sawyer and Sullivan Sweden. Now, it's hard not to remember those two adorable twin boys, Jeffrey and Michael Barone. Played by real-life twins, Sawyer and Sullivan Sweden, they were part of the heart of the show, alongside Ray Romano, Patricia Heaton, and the rest of the stellar cast. They helped create a funny, relatable picture of chaotic family life. But what happened after the show ended? And why did the twins step away from acting altogether? To understand their decision, you have to remember just how young they were when the show started. Sawyer and Sullivan were cast on Everybody Loves Raymond when they were just 16 months old. That's basically babies. From then on, their childhood was spent under studio lights, in front of cameras, on sets, surrounded by adult actors and production crew. It was all they knew for the better part of a decade. That kind of life sounds glamorous from the outside. Red carpets, fame, the chance to be on a hit TV show. But for kids, it can be really overwhelming. Instead of growing up in a typical way, with school friends, weekend soccer games, and birthday parties, they were learning lines, hitting their marks, and growing up on a TV set. As Everybody Loves Raymond wrapped up in 2005, both boys were around 10 years old. That's already a complicated age for any kid, let alone someone who spent all their early years on screen. When the show ended, there was a conscious decision by the boys and their family to step back from the industry and return to a more normal life. It wasn't like they were chasing more roles or trying to ride the fame train. Quite the opposite. They went home to Texas with their family, went to school, tried to be regular teenagers. That decision, in many ways, was about protecting their mental health and giving them a shot at a life outside the pressure cooker of Hollywood. Unfortunately, as many child stars will tell you, the transition from being a TV kid to just a kid can be tough. There's this sudden shift. You go from being recognized in public and being part of a high-profile project to just being someone else in a classroom. For Sawyer, this adjustment seemed especially hard. While Sullivan stayed mostly private, Sawyer reportedly struggled with depression and a sense of disconnection in the years after the show ended. Tragically, in 2015, he died by self-harm at the age of 19. His death shocked fans and brought renewed attention to the mental health challenges that many former child actors face when the cameras stop rolling. The Sweden family story is heartbreaking, but it's also a reminder of how fame, especially early fame, can affect kids differently than adults. While the world saw Jeffrey and Michael as sweet, funny parts of a sitcom family, Sawyer and Sullivan were real kids with real challenges. Their decision to leave the industry wasn't about rejecting success. It was about finding peace and growing up on their own terms. Sadly, for Sawyer, that peace proved elusive. Sullivan, meanwhile, has remained largely out of the public eye. Occasionally, he's spoken about his brother and their shared experience, but for the most part, he's chosen privacy. And who can blame him? After growing up in the spotlight, living a quiet life might just be the best path forward. Their story adds a bittersweet layer to the legacy of Everybody Loves Raymond. While the show brought joy to millions, behind the scenes, two young boys were navigating a world far more complicated than what we saw on our screens. It's a powerful reminder that child actors are, first and foremost, kids, and that sometimes the most courageous thing they can do is walk away. Elliot. Chris Elliott's time on Everybody Loves Raymond as Peter McDougal, Amy's oddball brother, was definitely one of the show's more memorable guest appearances. His character was quirky, socially awkward, and brought a totally different kind of humor to the Barone family dynamic. Even though he only appeared in a handful of episodes, Peter quickly became a fan favorite because he was just so weird in the best way possible. But then, just as quickly as he showed up, he disappeared. A lot of fans have wondered, what happened? Why did Chris Elliot leave the show? The answer, surprisingly, isn't anything dramatic. There was no behind-the-scenes feud, no creative differences, and no scandal. It really just came down to scheduling conflicts and Chris Elliott's already jam-packed career. Unlike many actors who settle into one long-running role, Elliot has always been more of a creative wanderer. He juggled a lot, acting, writing, and comedy gigs all at once. Everybody Loves Raymond was only one part of what he was doing at the time, and while it was a fun gig, it wasn't his main focus. Elliot has a long history in comedy and television, going all the way back to Late Night with David Letterman, where he became known for his offbeat humor and strange characters. Over the years, he's written for TV, starred in cult comedy films like Cabin Boy, and taken on other TV roles like his hilarious performance as Chris in Schitt's Creek years later. So when it came to Raymond, it was more of a side project than a long-term commitment. His guest role added flavor to the show, but he was never meant to be a permanent fixture. Elliot left because he had other things on his plate. It wasn't a matter of not wanting to be part of the show, it was just a matter of timing and priorities. He popped in, made everyone laugh with his brilliantly awkward portrayal of Peter, and moved on to the next creative challenge. And honestly, that's kind of the beauty of a career like his. Always shifting, always surprising. While fans might have wanted more Peter McDougal, the short and sweet run he had made the character all the more unforgettable. Katherine Helmond. Katherine Helmond was one of those familiar faces that instantly brought charm and elegance to the screen. On Everybody Loves Raymond, she played Lois Whelan, Deborah's sophisticated and often hilariously snobby mother. While she wasn't in a ton of episodes, every time she appeared, she left a strong impression. Fans definitely noticed her absence in the later seasons, and many wondered why she didn't stick around more regularly. The truth is, her departure wasn't due to any drama or behind-the-scenes tension. It was actually quite simple and rooted in her own life choices. By the time she took on the role of Lois, Katherine Helmond was already a respected actress with a long and successful career. She was best known for her roles in classic shows like Soap and Who's the Boss, and she'd earned a solid place in television history. When she joined Everybody Loves Raymond, she wasn't looking to restart a full-time acting career. In fact, she was semi-retired and pretty selective about the work she took on. Acting was still something she loved, but at that point in her life, it wasn't her main focus anymore. Katherine had decided that she wanted to spend more time enjoying her personal life, being with family, traveling, and just stepping out of the spotlight a bit. The grind of regular TV work, with long hours and demanding schedules, just didn't appeal to her anymore. She had earned the right to slow down and choose when and how she worked. So, rather than commit to a regular spot on the show, she opted to appear only occasionally. The show's creators and cast respected her decision completely. They were just happy to have her on board whenever she was available, and her scenes were always crafted to make the most of her limited time. Her limited role wasn't because anyone wanted her gone. It was just a reflection of where she was in her life and career. She didn't leave the show out of frustration or because of any creative differences. She simply preferred to take it easy and live life on her own terms, and honestly, that's something most people can admire. Katherine Helmond brought her signature class and wit to the show every time she appeared, and even though she wasn't in every episode, her performances left a lasting impression on fans. Why Everybody Loves Raymond. What made it so popular and beloved by millions? At the center of Everybody Loves Raymond is something super simple but powerful: family. The show revolves around Ray Barone, a sports writer who lives in a house right across the street from his parents, Marie and Frank, and his older brother, Robert. This setup feels like something out of real life for so many people. Who hasn't had a parent who calls a little too often, or a sibling who just knows how to push your buttons? The family members are constantly butting heads, bickering, teasing, and yet there's this undeniable bond that holds them together. What made this relatable was how real the family interactions felt. Unlike some sitcoms that rely on wacky plots or outlandish characters, Everybody Loves Raymond kept things grounded. The humor often came from simple everyday annoyances, like Marie's overbearing ways, Frank's gruffness, or Robert's jealousy over Ray's family life. The show captured the essence of what it's like to live close to family: the good, the bad, and the hilarious. It's a show about the familiar messiness of family love, which is probably why viewers connected with it so deeply. The writing on Everybody Loves Raymond was consistently clever, but it never felt like it was trying too hard to be funny. The humor was dry, sometimes sarcastic, but very natural. Ray's character often delivered these deadpan lines that perfectly captured the exasperation of dealing with family drama. The supporting characters, Deborah, Ray's wife, Marie and Frank, his parents, and Robert, his brother, were all so well drawn that each brought their own flavor of comedy to the table. What's special about this show is that it wasn't just about punchlines. There was a lot of heart underneath the jokes. The moments of genuine affection, frustration, and understanding came through in the writing and performances. This balance of humor and emotional warmth is a big reason the show stood out. You laughed, but you also felt the reality of family relationships: imperfect, complicated, and deeply loving. One of the biggest reasons Everybody Loves Raymond worked so well was its cast. Ray Romano had this everyman charm that made him instantly likable, playing the guy just trying to get through life and family without losing his mind. Patricia Heaton, as Deborah, gave the perfect counterbalance. She was relatable, often the voice of reason, but also had her own quirks and frustrations that made her super real. Then there were the parents. Doris Roberts, as Marie Barone, was a masterclass in playing the meddling, overbearing mom who's impossible to resist. Peter Boyle's Frank was the gruff, no-nonsense dad who still had his moments of warmth. And Brad Garrett, as Robert, brought this lovable mix of jealousy, insecurity, and good-heartedness. The chemistry among these actors was off the charts, making the family feel genuine and lived in rather than scripted. Because the actors bounced off each other so well, the show felt less like a staged sitcom, and more like you were eavesdropping on a real family's conversations and conflicts. That natural flow was a huge draw for audiences. Everybody Loves Raymond hit the airwaves in 1996, during a golden era of sitcoms centered around family life and relatable everyday scenarios. What set it apart was its subtlety and simplicity. While other shows went for big, flashy moments or extravagant setups, Raymond kept it cozy and familiar. The late 90s and early 2000s were a time when many people were juggling busy lives and appreciated a TV show that felt like comfort food, a place to unwind and laugh at the stuff we all go through. The show's gentle humor and warm portrayal of family life made it a perfect fit for that cultural moment. It wasn't trying to shock or be outrageous, it was just honest and funny about family. And that was exactly what people wanted. Thanks to reruns and streaming, it stayed accessible to new viewers and kept loyal fans coming back. The characters and their stories became a kind of cultural touchstone for what a classic family sitcom should be. It's the kind of show that people still recommend to friends who want to binge something funny and heartwarming. The fact that it still feels relevant and enjoyable today speaks to the quality of the writing and performances. The show captured something universal and timeless about family. It's chaos, love, and comedy that resonates no matter what decade you're watching in. You reached the end of the video. Drop your thoughts below, and let's hear from you too. Don't forget to subscribe for more uploads.